So the ideology, this again back dignitas infinita, this ideology, gender ideology, envisages a society without sexual differences, thereby eliminating the anthropological, that means of man, woman, basis of the family. If these are not different, you have no family. So essentially, gender ideology is profoundly anti-family. Introduction. Anyway, so essentially, gender ideology. And we're going to look at what it is, we're going to look at its background, and we're going to look at what gender is all about. And it is a very fascinating area, and it is very important, because I suppose this is what a lot of what they call culture wars are all about. Not that we want to be necessarily culture warriors, but it's very good that we know this kind of stuff and be able to help people with answers to their questions. Okay, so the first thing here, so there's a document that was produced very recently by the DDF, that's the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, what used to be known as the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith beforehand. So they look after basically keeping the faith on the rails, keep it orthodox, and so they produced this thing called Dignitas Infinita, infinite dignity, and so it was this year, maybe 2 months ago. And it was dealing with a lot about the infinite dignity of the person, but then a section of it deals with gender ideology. Okay, but in it they make this point that the church wishes, first of all, to reaffirm that every person, regardless of sexual orientation, ought to be respected in his or her dignity and treated with consideration, while every sign of unjust discrimination is carefully avoided, particularly any form of aggression and violence. Okay, so for this reason it should be denounced as contrary to human dignity the fact that in some places not a few people are imprisoned, tortured, and even deprived of the good of life solely because of their sexual orientation. So that is a fact. And I threw in here, I don't know if anybody could recognize what this might be. This is a prisoner uniform from Auschwitz, and it's got a pink triangle on it, because the pink triangle, the Nazis used different symbols, or the yellow star is the most famous one to identify Jews, but then different colored triangles were to identify different color kind of criminal groupings or undesirables, and the pink was for homosexuals. Okay, so this is a sign of, certainly a real mistreatment, discrimination against people on account of their sexual orientation. Okay, so that's just to say this first of all up front, that when we consider gender identity and all that, as we look at this, there's a very basic thing in the way that the church approaches error, is that you love the person, not the error. Okay, and that when you talk about an error, that we have to, there's a phrase from St. Paul, veritatis facientum in caritate, saying or doing the truth in love. So you have to try and combine these two things, truth and love. And if it's all love with no truth, it's not really love. And it's all truth with no love, it's not really true. So, and it's a careful balance, because if it was all truth and no love, then you become hard, reactionary, and unfortunately that can happen. And in some circles that does happen, that protesting against things that are wrong, but without any love. So we have to be always very careful that we combine truth and love. Okay, right. So this is a June Pride parade I think it's in Brazil. And I just put here, so obviously you have the Pride flag here, a new civic religion, because a lot of commentators actually identify in the whole Pride phenomenon, LGBTQ, that all over the world, in virtually all kind of capital cities, we have it here, well, not just capital cities, cities all over the world, you have this kind of phenomenon of people parading like this, celebrating, flying this flag, and you could say, what is this? Okay, what is this phenomenon? And some people point out, which I think is very true, it has many of the features of a religion. And some people are saying this is very like what maybe Corpus Christi processions were once in certain Junes of long ago. And it has that same function. People gathering together, sense of belonging to something, a greater group than you, celebrating something, thing that brings great unity amongst people. You all follow the same, you all fly the same flag. You know, amazing, worldwide, this flag is flown. And so it's much more, you know, when you see the flag flying, you say, is that a political flag? Or is that a cultural flag? Or is that, what is that? What is that? Also, who's got the trademark on the flag? Has somebody got the trademark on the flag? So that's the kind of interesting question we should ask. In some countries, in Denmark, they're saying, well, really, on government buildings, only one flag should be flown, and that's the national flag, and no other flag should be flown. Because, well, there's a good point in that. I said, so, when this flag is being flown on government buildings and so on, or buses are being painted with this colour, it's good to kind of say, well, what is that actually? You know, who kind of organises that and so on. Okay. That's the White House. Just to say, you know, obviously, if you can get the White House to put your flag, as it were, straight all across its facade, and that you have made it. Okay. In other words, you're now, you're the most powerful country in the world, the center of that power, and then you get this statement of kind of adherence to whatever this flag means. You've made it. You're no longer, certainly, very hard to say that you are the weak one, or that you are. Maybe you're discriminated against, as we see in there, certainly some countries, but you've made it big when the White House does this. Okay, and we're going to look at ideology in a moment, but anyway, it's certainly global. It's all over the world. Okay. So evolution of gender ideology. So we're going to look at the background. Okay, and how do we get here in 2024? Now, for the past, say, 10 years, you do have the pride flag flown everywhere. LGBTQ stuff everywhere, especially in schools and so on. So where did this come from? Because it wasn't here, say, 20 years ago. Okay, so 30 years ago. So how do these things don't just pop up? Obviously, they have a genesis. Okay, so we'll look at this. So it comes largely from feminism. Okay, and feminism comes in 3 waves. Okay, and the very first wave is first wave feminism, basically 19th century to the 1920s, when it essentially got what it was looking for. And a lot of the early feminists were actually very good Christians, Protestants, in England and the United States, and their inspiration was largely Christian. Okay, and they could see that women were quite discriminated against, very much in the Anglo-Saxon world. There's historical reasons why that happened that way, but in the Anglo-Saxon world, England and America, that kind of world had become quite, certainly you could say the Protestant world, and some people would say because they lost Our Lady, they lost a certain sense of the dignity of women that the Catholic world naturally has, because we've got Our Lady and she is the greatest of all human beings next to our Lord. And so we always have the Catholic world, okay, with some blips, Our Lady kind of guarantees the position of women. Protestantism lost this with the Reformation, and you could see this by the time the 19th century came around, especially the 18th century, you could see the effects of that. And so there was this very good women in the 19th century, and right up, and basically looking for things like the vote. Okay, certain equality where equality was due, that women wouldn't be second-class citizens, which is perfectly valid. Okay, second one. Oh, sorry, these are some of the people. Mary Wollstonecraft. She's one of the figures. Okay, next one. And then it did largely turn into the suffragettes. The suffragettes in especially in England, vote women, because women weren't allowed to vote, which was now we would see that's not that's very unjust. So, and they got by whatever year, by the 1920s, they had got the vote, universal suffrage, as it's called, universal vote. Okay. Second wave of feminism. Then, this is the feminism, the sexual revolution. This is different, okay? This now is a kind of feminism which is what we would say now erring towards radical feminism, okay? In the sense of linking it with things like abortion, or abortion rights and that kind of thing. Okay. So this lady is the most famous and the most influential of the second wave feminists. You might have heard of her, Simone de Beauvoir. She was the mistress of Jean-Paul Sartre, a very famous existential philosopher. And this is her most, she wrote a very large book where she outlined her feminism, and it's very, I would say, some of it's very dark stuff. Okay, basically, abortion rights, complete abortion rights, anti-marriage, anti all the traditional conception of things that would be natural for a woman. She's against them all. She's very radical. And then she has this very famous phrase, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. And that's what we're going to see, that becomes more important because the idea that, well, to put it kind of bluntly, womanhood, or your gender, as we now call it, is not something God gives you. It's something somehow you develop or you choose or whatever, but it's not given by God. That's the kind of radical step. Okay. Betty Friedan. So she was, again, a kind of continuation of Simone de Beauvoir's kind of work. And she famously compares the dehumanization of housewives to that of Jews in the Nazi concentration camps. She ups the rhetoric. Her rhetoric is very intense. And she makes all these kind of anti-traditional, especially in America, and her claims are rather dubious. Okay, so this idea of women kind of slaves in the home, as you're saying there, and it's overblown. Her rhetoric is overblown, to put it mildly. Okay. And then this other one, you've never heard of her because she's very well, not very well known, Shulamith Firestone. Now she's writing in the 60s and 70s, and now what we see in her is where communism, Marxism, she's very influenced by Marxism. Okay. In a way, what the other might have been, the others, but she's very influenced by Marxism. And so if you know anything about Marx, you might recognize this quote might ring a bell with you. I'll just read it out. Just as to assure elimination of economic classes requires the revolt of the underclass, the proletariat, and the seizure of the means of production, so to assure the elimination of sexual classes requires the revolt of the underclass, women, and the seizure of the control of reproduction. Does that make any sense? Not really. So basically, in communism, the workers have to rise up and seize the factories, okay, from the nasty factory owners, okay, just exploiting the workers. So she says, well, actually now the women are the underclass, they're like the workers, they have to seize not the factories, the means of production, but they have to seize the means of reproduction, their wombs, from who? From not the factory owner, but the males, the patriarchy. So what from Karl Marx was he didn't talk about the patriarchy, but he talked about the exploiting capitalists, the rich capitalists and so on. And you rise up, you have a revolution, you seize the factories, you get the factories, you own the factories. So she applies this very cleverly to women rising up, seizing from the patriarchy, from the husbands and from men in general, the means of reproduction. So it's quite something. Okay. So here we're postmodernism is where we are now, okay, and postmodernism is a very kind of confusing set of values, but we are, the academics tell us, we are in a postmodernist age, okay. Now the bottom line with postmodernism is there's no truth, okay. Everything is completely relative, but not only that, but that if somebody says there's truth. Somebody says, I have the truth, okay, in some way. Well, then you have to be very suspicious of them because what they're doing is trying to manipulate you, okay? Truth is always a power grab, That's the bottom line in postmodernism. So we see here, if I'm not mistaken, you click on there. This guy, Michel Foucault. Okay, so he is very much behind the postmodern view, and this idea of power. It's all about power. So essentially, he's very suspicious of any institutions. Everybody's they're seeking a power grab, and especially anybody who says this is the truth. What they're trying to do is not help people or do anything benevolent. They're trying to get power over other people. So they read this into any authority, especially, obviously, the church, Christianity. So when the Christianity comes along and says, this is what God has revealed, they say, aha, what's that? Power grab. Okay? And so sexual roles then are in position of power. So basically, male and female, that whole thing, he says, is a power struggle. Male is trying to assert power over the female. So that has to be abolished somehow. Okay, and next one. This lady is the one who kind of runs with that. Judith Butler, you might have heard of her. So she's still working as a philosopher in America. And she's a big fan of Michel Foucault, and she gives this radical feminist spin to Foucault. Okay, and she develops this idea, basically, that you have to not just assert women's rights like the first wave feminism did, or even kind of destroy traditional women's roles like second wave feminism, but you actually have to destroy the distinction of the sexes completely. There is no male and female. That is, so the word you might hear in this, if you hear these things talked about, is it's a construction. Male is a construct. Female is a construct made up by somebody. Who made it up? Nasty patriarchs like me. Okay? So it's basically a whole thing. When you read her, she's very difficult to read. But if you read her, it's quite amazing what she says. But basically, that the patriarchy, so all the kind of typical male authority figures and institutions and so on, and things almost like the family as well is an example of this. The family is a construct of the patriarchy, so they create completely maleness and femaleness. Like I said, complete construct. It's a very radical thing to say. It's kind of hard to believe, but anyway. Okay, so next thing. So I'll just give you one quote from Judith Butler because she is very difficult to follow. The body is not sexed in any significant sense. So in other words, not sexed, you don't have a sex. Okay? So in any significant sense, prior to its determination, hold on tight, within a discourse through which it becomes invested with an idea of natural essential sex. Now, so that is pretty incomprehensible, but what she is saying is that we are born basically vanilla. And then within some discourse, okay, within some kind of way of talking about human beings, somebody then becomes invested with a sex as if this were natural. So the idea, they would say, the doctor comes along when a child, I'm not making this up, that when the baby is born and the doctor, you can imagine a male doctor, comes along and says, this is a boy. Mm-hmm. Okay? She is saying, it's not a boy. Mm-hmm. It's vanilla. It's whatever. It is yet to be seen. Mm-hmm. But when the doctor assigns sex, I hereby decide you are a boy, and everything about you then will be masculine from here on. That's what she means. What she is saying then, it should be rather he, or that would be a mistake, that child should be left vanilla, nothing, until a certain point that child says, well, I think I'm not even male or female, because now we're not going to have two genders, we're going to have a multiplicity of genders. And what when that child decides that I am whatever gender, okay? This investing is kind of a bit suspect. You know, the doctors, whoever it is, power, those in power. So it's especially when it's a girl, I hereby decide you're a girl. In other words, you're in the inferior class. That's the way it's viewed. That's what she's viewing. Okay. Oh, sorry, I'll give you another one. The task of the LGBT movement is not simply to assert the rights of its members and to insist on their protection. This is somebody else talking. It is for Butler the much farther reaching task which entails, and this is a quote from her, no less than the remaking of reality, a reconstituting of the human. That's what she says. So that's really radical. We have to remake what a human being is. So this idea of a vanilla creature and then no gender. There's no gender at the beginning. Okay. Anyway, I'm not going to read this. She just got she got her first prize in a bad writing contest. And if you want, I'll send you that, but I'm not going to read it. Okay. But take my word for it. It's completely incomprehensible. Okay, next one. We're not going to bother. I'm not going to inflict it on you. Okay. So obviously she's a philosopher. She's working in the third level in the States. I forget what university. But this LGBTQ, her ideas, not just her, but Foucault, others like her, it primarily comes from the third level world. This is where people like the postmodern philosophers, there's a whole rake of them, but especially Foucault, they're taught in third level universities, different kind of institutions all around the world. Those people then go on to work as social scientists, as advisors to politicians, working in all kinds of things, and that is how this is how it happens, really. And people who genuinely believe this, even though you could say it's quite hard to believe, okay, that ideology, but there are people who believe it. And so here is just a little map showing universities, departments, research centers offering women's or gender studies programs per capita. Okay, so the red is the highest per capita, and then there's orange. You can't really see the orange, but it's a little less, and then pink is less, and green is less, and dark green is the least of all. Okay, I suppose white figures not available, but you can just see where there's a lot of the biggest number per capita of these kind of gender studies programs in universities or other third level institutions. Obviously Ireland is a red, by the way. We have 5. This is a couple of years ago, but anyway, where it just shows you England, the States have got 684, England has got less than us per capita, 34, etc. Spain 5, the same as us. Okay, next one. Okay, so the abolition of sexual difference. So what Foucault, and especially then the followers of Foucault, like Judith Butler, saying then sexual difference is not natural. There's nothing, as it were, God-given. And if somebody does say it's God-given or there's part of nature, well then that is suspicious. That's a kind of power grab. Okay? So let's look at this whole thing of sexual difference. Is there such a thing? Are we really different, the sexes? Okay. So these are just a little selection of the possible genders. Instead of 2, you got demi-girl, third gender, gender queer, non-binary, agender, gender version 2, agender version gender void, demi-gender, femine, butch. You got, that's only a little selection. Okay, so which one are you, would you say? Okay, so next. So, and gender. This is very sad, actually. It's very sad. And it's a real tragedy. There's no doubt about it. It's a real tragedy. So, but anyway, so obviously people who suffer from what is called gender dysphoria, which in the past used to be considered a bit like anorexia nervosa. When somebody suffering from anorexia nervosa thinks they're overweight, they're very slim, dangerously thin even, and that is very obvious to anybody looking at them, that they're trying to lose weight and they could die. Obviously, it's very dangerous. But obviously, people, and I think they probably still say, this is a psychological problem, which you have to treat and help people overcome this and get through it. Okay, and gender dysphoria used to be considered the same kind of issue as anorexia nervosa. I got a problem with my body. Essentially, I feel, and a person can feel dysphoria, very uncomfortable as a male or a female. And it used to be more males feeling uncomfortable in their body, and now females have overtaken them hugely. Okay, and females getting gender transition has, I think it's a 400% rise in about 10 years. It's huge. Okay, young girls, teenagers. So, so regarding gender theory, this is what this document says. Well, I'll read it. Whose scientific coherence is the subject of considerable debate amongst experts. In other words, gender theory is very dodgy, amongst the scientists. The Church recalls that human life in all its dimensions, both physical and spiritual, is a gift from God. This gift to be accepted with gratitude in place of the service of the good. Desiring a personal self-determination as gender theory prescribes, apart from this fundamental truth that human life is a gift, amounts to a concession to the age-old temptation to make oneself God, entering into competition with the true God of love revealed to us in the gospel. So again, from dignitas infinita. In other words, God has given us our life, our race, our gender, and other things. And there's certain things we have to accept. Okay? I'm 5'10". I'm not 6'4". Okay, I could get surgery, I suppose, to elongate my legs. Would that be, I think it'd be a waste of money, but there's certain things we have to accept, about ourselves. And one of the very fundamental things, because it's very fundamental to a human person, is the gender that God gave them. There are a tiny, tiny number of people who are called intersex. They're genuinely ambiguous. They're born maybe with male and female organs. Okay, it's not clear, okay, what they are. At the very beginning. So, but that figure is minuscule, tiny, tiny number, okay? Like 1 in whatever it is, like 100,000 or something. It's very, very, very small number. Okay, you can jump on. Okay, so this is a new anthropology, a new way of looking at human beings. So regrettably, in recent decades, attempts have been made to introduce new rights that are neither fully consistent with those originally defined, nor always acceptable. They've led to instances of ideological colonization, that's a strong word, in which gender theory plays a central role. The latter is extremely dangerous since it cancels out differences in its claim to make everybody equal. So this idea, and this is a very fundamental idea, that somehow there's something wrong with difference, okay? And that we can't acknowledge difference, or really acknowledge that differences are real. In other words, we have to pretend the difference between male and female, if there's anything there at all, it's negligible. Okay, we're going to look at things now which show it's not negligible. They're very, very significant. Differences between races, differences between all kinds of things. But the most fundamental difference is male-female. Okay, and they're very suspicious of any difference, as if difference is always going to be a power thing. If you've got difference, this is a power grab. Okay, next thing. So I just threw that in because, well, wherever you have ideology, basically you have an ideology is where you have a set of beliefs which are erroneous, okay, but the people believe them firmly, okay, and they want, in other words, they're erroneous because they don't correspond to reality. So, for example, saying that there's no male and female does not correspond to reality, the most self-evident reality. Okay, so ideologies are when you have a series of beliefs which are powerful, which don't correspond to reality, and they want to make reality fit the beliefs instead of make the beliefs fit the reality. And so you have to try to put this square peg in a round hole. That's what it always does. Marxism did the same, Nazism did the same thing. You've got these crazy, at the end of the day, crazy beliefs, and you try to shoehorn reality into these beliefs, okay? And that's why when in all these things, starting with little children is always the best, because they think they're learning, the adults are teaching them the world, and they trust and they absorb it all, because that's the way little children are made, to absorb all this stuff, totally trusting what they hear is the truth. And when it isn't, of course, it's very dangerous. It's very unfortunate. It's unfair as well. Okay, so we're going to look then at another prominent aspect of gender theory is that it intends to deny the greatest possible difference that exists between living beings, sexual difference. This foundational difference is not only the greatest imaginable difference, but also the most beautiful and most powerful of them, which is very nice. So the difference between the sexes is the most beautiful difference and the greatest difference between human beings. Much greater than the difference between races, a black person, a white person, or an Asian or a European or something. This is the big difference, the biggest difference. And you could say the differences are there for good reasons. And the difference between the sexes are there for the best reasons. Okay. You can jump on there. So Hannah Arendt, a philosopher, German originally, and when she just talks about this idea of ideology, this idea, hence ideological thinking becomes emancipated from the reality that we perceive with our five senses and insists on a truer reality concealed behind all perceptible things. Precisely what I was saying. Our five senses see males, females. However, when we get ideas, she's not talking about gender ideology, she's talking about Marxism and Nazism, because she experienced, especially Nazism, she fled Germany before the war. But we see things with our five senses. But then the ideology comes along and insists there's a truer reality behind this that we have to somehow manipulate or create. Okay, next one. Okay, so I just thought we'd look at some of the differences between male and female. Okay, there's many of them, but men are about 50%. We're about 50% stronger than women, and she's able to withstand higher temperatures. So it's kind of warm in here, but girls don't mind. A woman has a larger stomach, kidneys, liver, and appendix than a guy, but she's smaller lungs. It does give you less breathing capacity than a man. A man's right hemisphere of the brain is better developed. Therefore, they're more visual, mathematic, exploring, more sex-oriented, and commit the most violent crime. Women, though, have the left hemisphere is stronger, and therefore they're better at verbal things, communicative, sensitive, and more prone to phobias and depression. The second longest finger for most women is next to their thumb, the index finger. Okay, but for men, it's the opposite. I hope that applies. And you can check on your own. Keep the result to yourself. So I didn't realize that before seeing this. But anyway, for the men, normally that's the longest finger. Men typically have thicker skin, about 25% thicker than women, and a higher densities of the protein collagen, etc., etc., etc. Okay, these are differences which are there, which are not going to change with sex change or anything. Okay, so you can jump on there. Psychological differences. So there's a great little book called The Essential Difference, written by a Cambridge psychologist called Baron Cohen. He's the cousin of Sacha Baron Cohen, and he does this study about especially young boys and girls. He's just doing studies, and this is the bottom line. Girls empathize. Guys systemize. Girls love empathy, guys love systems. For the most part. This doesn't mean every guy, or every girl. These things is always for the most part. You could say for the most part, I don't know, lots of things regarding male-female difference. Okay, but for the most part, girls empathize. That means their drive is to identify another person's emotions and thoughts and respond to these with appropriate emotion. The empathizer intuitively figures out how people are feeling and how to treat people with care and sensitivity. That's why a lot of girls think guys are very insensitive, and even that they think a lot of guys that they know are suffering from Asperger's. Okay? Because guys are a lot worse at basically empathizing than girls and identifying emotions. And that looks to women, that looks like a lot of women, I would say this to wives, that they think their husband's got Asperger's, they laugh, okay? Because they're so true that they say, my gosh, he's so gauche, the things he says, his inability to relate to my emotions, etc., etc. Because actually in this, women are actually much more skilled because they've been practicing this since they were tiny. Okay, in truth, they've been really practicing empathy since they were literally out of the womb. Okay, guys, however, systemize. That's the left-hand side of the brain. Okay, the left lobe, or the left side of the brain is very, anyway, the studies on this, and a guy with the left-hand side of the brain, what this does is you want to analyze things, break it up. What makes this work? Explore a system. A system could be anything. For example, a football league. Okay, so many of the girls were following football leagues and swapping with other girls cards about players in different teams in a football league and so on. I wouldn't say many. The guys do this in one way or another. It's either football leagues, it's either war machinery, it's either a train set with all kinds of connections and all that kind of stuff. Guys love systems from the time they're tiny. Okay? They explore systems to extract underlying rules to govern the behavior of a system and to drive to construct systems. So we love the idea, you press this button and something over here goes on. Okay? How did that happen? Okay? The systemizer intuitively figures out how things work or what the underlying rules are controlling a system. Systems can be as varied as a pond, a vehicle, a computer, a maths equation, or even an army unit. They all operate on inputs and deliver outputs using rules. Okay? Boys are into systems from a very young age. So typically even memorizing and with great capacity. You know, whole again football league. When I was a kid, my systems was ships. I was big into ships, and transatlantic liners. I knew a lot about transatlantic liners, just as a system. That was it. Okay. So, but these are psychological differences, which this is just men. This is not propaganda. This is Baron Cohen in Cambridge, well, with this huge team of people investigating this. So it's very clear. Okay, next one. Spiritual difference. Okay, there's more, obviously harder to gauge because you can't really do scientific studies. You can do scientific studies with kids on their differences. By the way, the differences fade as people get older. So very elderly, or the men are less systems and the women less empathy. They tend to merge in old age, funny enough. But the differences are most pronounced in small children. Okay, spiritual difference. Okay, so women's receptive nature is paramount in understanding the women's genius. This is taken from, I think, Ratzinger. Men's nature is generative. Men are called to give their lives, even unto death, for the defense and protection of women. But men's nature and gifts are only half of God's design for humanity. His gift of himself in his masculine way of relating to the world are stunted and sterile when he cannot understand him spiritually in relation to women, both physically and spiritually. So this is a very classic thing. The women tend to receive. Okay? Even the idea of receiving into one's womb for 9 months a human being. A man couldn't cope with that. Okay? I don't think. Just a basic receptivity. Receiving, nurturing another human being. Okay? But men's is much more active. The generative role. Active and defending and all these kind of things. So the women... what they do say about this then is that women are much more interior in the sense of themselves, their own psychology, one another's feelings, the person that they nurture, domestic. You think of a home that a woman naturally, a guy can do it, but it doesn't come so naturally. But the creating a home, a protective place, whereas the guy is going to he's going to do active things. Okay, you know, conquer something, defend something, even somebody, well, different people to observe, the way men become friends, typically, is they do something together. They go out and they face in the same direction, they go and play football, they go and watch a football match, whatever it is. Women face each other, and they talk, and talk, and talk, and talk, and talk. Okay? So, men can't talk that much, okay? But it's so true. Neither one is better or worse, but it's just a difference. Okay, so we skip on then. So the ideology, this is getting back dignitas infinita. This ideology, the gender ideology, envisages a society without sexual differences, thereby eliminating the anthropological, that means of man, woman, basis of the family. If these are not different, you have no family. So essentially, gender ideology is profoundly anti-family, in the true sense of woman nurturing, man generating, between the two of them, her creating, as it were, the nest, him defending, whatever it is. No, that doesn't mean she has to be a housewife. Okay, doesn't mean extremely traditional roles, but this is the more or less of the roles of the mother. The mother is mothering. Okay, the father is challenging. Even regarding children, what mothers will do would love their child unconditionally. The father will in a sense make conditions, as in challenges. Let's go out and explore. Okay, so you see this the whole time. Okay, so next there. Therefore, all attempts to obscure reference to the ineliminable sexual differences between man and woman are to be rejected. We cannot separate the masculine and the feminine from God's work of creation, which is the prior to all our decisions and experiences, and where biological elements exist which are impossible to ignore. So in other words, it's saying very clearly, we cannot accept this abolition of the difference between men and women. This is a protest in France called the Manif pour tout. They had huge protests there over a number of years, basically protesting against gender ideology. And they were very successful. I don't know if they're still ongoing, but they were very, very big. And that's it. So any questions? Yeah.
Considering the natural or God-given differences between the sexes naturally, how can we support each other? Like, say, like women have a certain strength and then men have another strength. So how can we support each other in the weaker area?
Yeah, good question. And they are. This is a very good question, because what the Catholic philosophy has, a word that has been used and developed in the 20th century was complementarity. Okay, and it's a word that originally comes from atomic physics, and complementarity means that you co-fill each other. The ple of it's not compliment, as in you're looking lovely today, which is a compliment. It's complement, which is like plenitude, is to fill. So you co-fill, complementarity. So basically, the male complements what the woman doesn't have, and the female fulfills what the man doesn't have. And I think a lovely comparison is right in front of us all in our two hands. Okay, because we all have two hands, okay, which are very, very similar, but they're at the same time completely different. When you think about it, if you had two hands which were the exact same, you'd have two right hands or two left hands, it would be a mess. Because you've got two hands which are the same, equal dignity, but they're actually completely different. Everything on this hand is the other way around on this hand. And for that reason, we can twiddle our thumbs, we can clap, we can pray, these things. They complement each other. So the male has strengths, whatever, his psychological, physical strengths, open the bottle, So physical strength, 50% is a lot of extra physical strength. Psychological differences, as we saw there, he'll fix it, fix the TV, fix the car, and what are the things there? And the woman, that she has her thing, she's not good at that. Again, all the time, we say, for the most part. Okay, for the most part. You get some women who are geniuses with mechanics and all that kind of, but if you go to a mechanic shop, you'll typically see two blokes. Okay, so and even there's a great little video called, the next slide was a reading list, but anyway, there's this very interesting video called the Gender Paradox. It was made by a Finnish comedian. Okay, so, and he basically goes, it's very funny, and he goes into a hospital and says, all the nurses are there, okay, and he says, where are the guys, okay, and they say, what are you talking about, where are all the male nurses? And they say, well, we had one here a couple of years ago, he left. And then he goes to a building site, and all the guys are working away, and he says, where are all the girls, okay, and they start laughing at him, okay, buzz off, okay, and what he basically is saying, here we are in Finland, a very developed, very wealthy country. Anybody can do what they want to do. And the story was always that the only reason why women did nursing and didn't do building jobs was because they couldn't break in. They couldn't do it. They weren't allowed to do it. Okay? And he's basically saying, and he's got no axe to grind. Well, it's amazing, actually, amazing. It's in Finnish, but it's got subtitles, thankfully. He interviews all kinds of academics. And he goes to this kind of gender institute, okay, and interviews them all. He doesn't get a lot. He kind of plays stupid, And he asked them, why is this? And why? I go to the building site, there's no girls. And I go to the hospital, there's no guys. And what's the story? And they spin a big yarn. Anyway, his basic finding is clearly, if society is developed enough, and it's very, Finland is a very wealthy society, it's a very liberal society. There's no traditional gender roles. You can do whatever you want. And basically his finding is that where you have that, well then women will do what they want to do, which is caring jobs. Guys will do what they want to do, which is active jobs, for the most part. Because all these nurses, and they're all girls. Okay, and actually as a result, the Gender Institute was closed down, actually, after this was put up. Within a couple of months, the Gender Institute, which would be receiving a lot of public funds, was closed down. It's amazing. Because when you see it, these people interviewed, and they are really talking, it's kind of almost devious, the way they're talking. It's really amazing. Actually, he travels around the world. He interviews this guy that I mentioned, Baron Cohen. He interviews him. He interviews a whole lot of academics to show what the people in the Gender Institute in Finland were saying was complete nonsense. It's quite a thing. The gender paradox, well worth watching. But anyway, complementarity. That men should be men. Watching for that, there's the excessive side. You can be excessively, women gossip. Men are not really interested in gossiping. Did you hear about John? Couldn't care about John, okay? Did you hear about Mary? So women gossip because that's what they're made. Because they want to know about women. What the stories, you hear the latest, And guys we meet and we want to talk about Trump and about Joe Biden and about the Secret Service and all that kind of thing. Okay, so that's, again, for the most part, but allowing males to be males, and males have to be careful not to be too male in a certain sense, and females should be females, feminine, and guys should be masculine. Masculine doesn't mean super hyper butch and working out, but just naturally, the way God made us. Males should be male, masculine, women should be women, feminine, and then everything will work out. Okay? Yeah.
So you were saying that you're trying to do away with distinction between male and female, but yet you showed us the slide of all the different sexual orientations and the genders that they're putting forward, which shows that they desire distinction and differentiation from others, that they're unique in sexual orientation. If there's good in that they're seeking identity, but obviously in the wrong places. When you're confronted with a conversation with someone that's obviously coming from that perspective, but you don't know them well, so you can't have a heart-to-heart with them, like if it's your cousin or sibling. How do you affirm the good and try and direct it back without alienating them?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good question. One thing about ideology, this is not a very positive answer, but one thing about ideology, it really gets into you, okay? And that, this is the history of certainly the 20th century. When somebody gets into an ideology, it's not just an intellectual thing, but it becomes, this is why the idea of it becoming like a religion. It becomes like, in the same sense, it'd be very hard for me to lose my religion. Because it's my belonging, my whole belief system is built around this, it becomes part of me, So that's one of the things about it's not just with one argument we're going to solve this, or read Baron Cohen, or look at this wonderful video online. That's not going to do it. Okay, so you have to realize that the dynamics of ideology are very strong. Okay, because in a certain sense, when you've got ideology, it's almost like, that's why again, talking about religion, it becomes almost kind of salvific. Okay, and that's why this is not just a whole series of funny ideas, but it becomes like a religion for you. It's salvific, it's this love, this becomes like the embodiment of love and everything, and if you're against it, you're kind of somehow the devil, you know what I mean, to oppose this. So just that's not a very helpful answer in a way, but just to realize what you're up against. And therefore, I said, one thing I'd say, buckets of patience. Buckets of patience. The truth will out. At the end of the day, the truth will out. And little things will strike people, just like people in a false religion. Something that doesn't, something is jarring, or they have an experience that they say, that undermines to some degree my religion. So I would think you have to treat it like somebody has fallen into a false religion, actually. but very patiently. I would say pray for them, but also you have to be very patient and respectful. I mean, the person really they're in error, but as we were saying, Saint Paul, veritatem facientes in caritate, saying the truth or doing the truth in love. So you don't hit people over the head with the truth. Okay, it's not a hammer. Okay, so you present it patiently, respectfully, all that kind of thing. But I say often it's the long haul, actually. Yeah, but it's a good question. All right.
I'm just wondering how useful the term gender is, since it's quite a recent kind of invention. You said at the beginning, that people in the Nazi concentration camps were persecuted because of their gender identity. It's a very kind of thrown around term used in loads of different ways. Would that be sexual orientation or sexual experience or sexual attraction? Or because like if you go into your average university campus, you say there's two genders, people will say no, there's two sexes. Gender is this concept that varies independently from that. And not only that, but now it seems gender identity, sexual orientation and sexual expression all vary independently from biological sex, which a lot of people recognize, but they have all these other concepts. So then, I mean, you show the picture of all the different sexual expressions then, or gender identities, whatever it might be. It seems that each person has a different experience of their sexuality. Therefore, there's probably as many people as there are in the world. There's probably as many gender identities, if that's what the definition
it's true. So the idea that the word gender, which originally comes from grammar, okay, because you could have 3 or 4 gender, neutral as a gender, male, female, I don't know, there's more genders than that. But anyway, it's a grammatical term. And then that was used instead of sex, okay. So sex is male and female, they're 2 sexes. They're always, just in nature, there's no other sex except male and female. And so this idea that gender was then chosen to kind of move away from the idea of nature and natural sexes, either that they don't exist, that it's a creation, that's a fiction, even though we can see male and female all over the place, but somehow trying to say that's completely irrelevant. You're the male and female, as even Judith Butler was saying there, and she's a little bit slightly devious in the way she puts things, I think, but that she says it's not in any way significant. Okay, will she actually deny? There's X and Y chromosomes. She mightn't, but she would say it's kind of irrelevant. What is irrelevant is the gender thing, which is what is chosen, what I feel. So there could be something completely different. And as you say, anybody can feel anything. You got as many genders as you got human beings on the planet. That's true. Even the idea that a guy saying "I feel woman," a lot of feminists, second wave feminists, okay, who are mistreated by the third wave feminists, but a lot of second wave feminists would say, "What does it feel like to feel like a woman?" You know what I mean?
What is a woman?
Well, that idea that I feel like a woman. Why is that? I feel like a woman, and a woman might say, "Well, what does that feel like?" You know what I mean? How do you know what a woman feels like? And then also that the whole transsexual thing, that very often I find it must be insulting to women, because when people do the transsexual thing, it's always like a caricature. It's for me, it's the kind of Craggy Island, a Craggy Island version of priests, complete caricature, huge blonde hair. Pardon?
Do you mean like a drag queen?
Yeah, exactly. And that they're almost like they're sending up, transsexual, it's almost like sending up women, that she's just making women look like a joke. She, comes out and says, I'm a woman, or, I feel like a woman, and dresses like a caricature of a woman. There was a similar way, that Father Ted is a caricature of priests, Okay, fair enough. But still, that's a caricature. And the transsexual is a caricature of women, I'm surprised sometimes that more women don't find that a little bit offensive, that, well, why do you have to dress like that? The most caricaturing kind of way that you could of women, Anyway, so, but it's true, this idea of making it totally subjective, whereas what we're saying and that this document from the Vatican is saying, it is God-given actually. It's nature. And nature, we feel it in different ways, but male is male, female is female, and we don't have we are physically what we are spiritually. In other words, we don't have two entities, kind of a female thing within a female body. If you're a male, you're a male. And your soul is male, if you want to put it that way. Okay? So, okay, well, anyway, it's a complex question. Yeah.
This is sort of less of a question, more of a kind of. I think a issue I have is that often we'll say that like second and third wave feminism wasn't great, and gender ideology came from second and third wave feminism. But first wave feminism was good. But none of the subsequent waves of feminism would have occurred without first wave feminism. And the thing about first wave feminism is that even though you say there are a lot of Christian women who were involved in first wave feminism, a significant number of them were not Christian, and they were saying the reason why women are held back is because of Christianity and the patriarchal kind of way Christianity is. Basically.
Yeah.
And I think really you have to kind of go further back than you have to like that. Really, it was first wave feminism that has caused everything that has occurred since then. And when you kind of learn about the history of women, before first wave feminism, it's always through a feminist perspective, or a feminist writer perspective, as opposed to like how generally other women felt.
Yeah.
You don't really hear what they thought.
Yeah.
So I think it's
good point.
That's just
yeah. It's a good point. It's true. But, actually, when I put up the slide there, Mary Wollstonecraft, and she was in the first wave, and she wasn't. I wouldn't say she's a model for anybody. So it's true. In the first wave, there was a mix. It was a mixed bag. But that said, at the same time, there is a legitimate feminism. Okay, there's a legitimate. You have Christian saints, and Edith Stein. You say she would be a legitimate feminist. I don't know what she would have thought of the first wave feminists. Okay, they are working in the Protestant world and so on. But there is a legitimate, assertion of femininity against male prejudice. And actually the Protestant world, to my mind, was a lot of these things did apply. That there was an idea, it was kind of complex, but there was an idea in the Protestant world that women were inferior. Because essentially the Protestant world did elevate, if you want to put it this way, left brain hemisphere to the high. It said this is what it's all about. Okay.
Yeah. I think that even like when it comes to voting, for most people, voting only became a thing about 200 years ago. All men couldn't vote either.
That's right, yeah, it was very limited.
Just before women got the vote, most men couldn't vote either.
That's right, yeah.
Which a lot of people just don't seem to realise, or they just
forget
completely or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it's like, at the time of suffrage, especially in the United States, they had suffrage in certain states already in America, and they had certain referendums in each state, and there were referendums that women actually voted in against voting.
Wow, okay.
And what the feminists did is they actually blocked some of these referendums from occurring because they didn't want the women to vote, basically not to vote.
Amazing. Okay, vote against the vote. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically that's what happened. There were more anti-suffragettes than
amongst the women. Yeah, interesting. Interesting,
but,
yeah. No, it's a good point. It's a good point.
Different perspective.
Yeah, no, it's a good point on first wave feminism. Okay.
Thank you, Father.
Super.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Great pleasure. Great.